Okay, today we're going to do 4.5, solving problems with linear equations. So if you could please write the heading and the first example and press pause and come back when you're ready. Okay, we can use letters or pronumerals, as they're called, to write equations from sentences. So 3 plus a certain number is 8. So we should say what we're going to use. So let a certain number equal or be x. Now you can put P or C or D or anything you like. So 3 plus a certain number is just we have x and we want to plus 3. So add 3. And is obviously equal to 8. Now, this doesn't say that we need to solve it, but we're going to solve it to practice what we do. So some of your questions will say just write as it is, and others will say solve them. So what's the opposite of plus 3? It's minus 3. So your answer is going to be x equals 8 minus 3 is 5. Next one. When we subtract 8 from a number, we get 12. Don't forget to pause if you need to write this down. Well, you do need to write it down, so press pause. Okay, so we're going to let the number be x. When we subtract 8 from a number, so remember, that's different to we have a number and we subtract 8. So when we subtract 8 from a number, we must start with our x. We are going to subtract 8 from that number. So it's x minus 8, and that's going to equal 12. The opposite of minus 8 is plus 8. So your answer is x because these two will cancel. That's what we want by itself. And 12 plus 8 is 20. So your certain number must be 20. Don't forget, this is like the ones we've done before where you can check it out. When we subtract 8 from a number, we think the number's 20. 20 minus 8 is 12, so we must be right. Next one. Press pause. 3 more than 7 times a certain number. So the number is x. And the first thing you have to look at is the 7 times a certain number. Okay, that's going to be 7 times x. All right, it says times. Times means sitting right next to it. Now go back to the start. 3 more than that. So the words more than mean plus, and we're going to add 3 to that, and the answer is going to be 0. Okay, now we always get rid of whatever is furthest away from the x first. So the plus 3 is furthest away. So we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. 3's will go. We're left with 7x. And 0 minus 3, don't forget your number line. Okay, which way does negative go? To the left. We're at 0. We want to go 3 spots. So our answer is going to be negative 3. Now we have 7 times x. The opposite of times x. Times 7 is divided by 7. They will cancel. So your x is minus 3 on 7. Now, I did go quite fast, so don't forget you can rewind this video if you need to. Okay. Next one. Please press pause while you write the question out. When 2 is divided by a certain number, okay, the number will equal x, or is going to be x. When 2 is divided by a certain number, that's not a certain number is divided by 2. That's different. When 2 is divided by a certain number, so that means 2 is divided by a certain number. The answer is 8 more than that number. So we're going to have equals 8 more than that number. So that is going to be the same number and 8 more to that number. Now we're just going to leave that one because I don't think you get any as hard as that in this question, in this exercise. And if you do, you can let your teacher know and they'll go through it with you. All right, now this is getting tricky. Once you get to the end, you have to get some worded problems. Okay, so stay with me here. Copy this out. It's really important that you have this one in your notes. In a basketball game, James scored 5 more points than Steve. So what you want to do is you want to find the smallest first, and you let that be the the pronumeral. So in a basketball game, James scored 5 more points than Steve. So Steve has less points. So we're going to say, let Steve equal X. So how much is James going to be? If Steve is X, James is 5 more than Steve. So James will be Steve's score plus 5 more than that. Now the question says if they scored a total of 27 points between them, so all together, how many points did each of them score? So we need to add Steve's points and James's points all together and make them equal to 27. So we're going to write down Steve's points, that's X, and we're going to add that to James, which is X plus 5. And all together, they equal 27 points. Now, X plus X is 2X, plus 5 is equal to 27. So now we're back to doing what we normally do with equations. So what's the number that's furthest from the X? It's plus 5. So we need to subtract 5, both sides. We are left with just the 2X here. And 27 minus 5 is 22. 2 times 11. How do we get rid of the opposite of, what's the opposite of times? It's divide. So we're going to divide by 2. Divide by 2. So we're left now with X equal to 22 divided by 2, which is great. The question says how many points did each score? So who scored 11? Have a think about it. Okay, if you go back up here, Steve is X. So that means, I'm running out of space. Sorry, let's see if I can lift up my page. That means that Steve scored Steve scored 11 points. And James, remembering James, what's his equation? His equation is X plus 5. So James must have scored 11 plus 5. So he scored 16 points. Have a think about how you can check if they're right. We think Steve did 11 and James did 16. And we know that altogether they scored 27. So 11 plus 16 is in fact 27. So it probably means you're right. Okay. Excuse me while I turn my page. Okay, and another worded problem which is quite tricky too, so please write this down. Taxi charges are $3.60 plus $1.38 every kilometre for any trip. Okay, so think about that. You must pay $3.60, full stop. Everybody pays $3.60. But they also have to pay $1.38 every kilometre that they drive. So if I got into a taxi and I didn't drive anywhere, but I took up his time, this probably wouldn't happen, but if I drove nowhere, I would owe $3.60. If I drove 1 kilometre, I would have to pay him $3.60 just for getting in the taxi, plus 1 times $1.38. If I went for 2 kilometres, I'd have to pay him $3.60 plus 2 times $1.38. So you might be able to see an equation forming at the moment. The first thing we have to work out is what our pronumeral is going to be. So X is going to be how far you travelled, because it says if Vicky's taxi fare was $38.10, so you know what it cost me to get into a taxi, but you don't know at this stage how far I went. So we're going to say let x be the distance travelled, okay, because that is what we want to find out. Now, how much does everything cost? The total cost is going to be always, remember I said the minute I get in, it costs me $3.60. Plus, if it's 1 kilometre, then we do 1 times $1.38. If it's 2, we do 2 times $1.38. If it's 10, we do 10 times $1.38. So I'm changing the amount of kilometres in my example every time. So for here, x is the distance travelled. So the amount of kilometres, the thing I keep changing in the example, is going to be x. And every kilometre costs me $1.38. So I can say $1.38, for instance, if it was 2 kilometres, I'd pay $3.60 plus $1.38 times 2. We don't know what that is, so we put times x because that's what we're trying to find out. Now, we also know the total cost. Now, I'm going to put this on the left-hand side because that's the way I like to deal with x's, just to have them on the left-hand side. And you will notice I've just left off the 0 because it doesn't need to be there. If you keep it there, it's fine though. So the total cost we know is $38.10. We can put that in. And all of a sudden, even though it's an ugly equation, we have an equation. I say ugly because we've got decimal places. Make sure you're using your calculator at this stage. All right, so we have to get rid of something, and we move the number that is furthest from the x. So that's going to be 3.6. If we have 3.6, so 3.6 is just sitting there, we need to subtract 3.6. And we have to do that, of course, to the other side as well. Now we are left with 1.38x, and that will be equal to 38, whatever that is, minus 3.6, which is 34.5, I hope. Is it? So this is like, yep, $3.60. So it might help you actually to leave that 0 on because we are talking dollars and cents and it will make more sense to you. All right, now we've got 138 times x. So the opposite of times is divided by. So we're going to divide both sides by that. So we have x is equal to, and using our calculator, we get 25. Now you need to write some form of equation, sentence. Doesn't have to be much. I'm going to write, looking at the question, how far did she travel? Vicky travelled 25, and you need to put what the units are, which is kilometres. Now some of these do get really difficult, so you need to check back into Teams and ask for help. All right, ask your teacher for help. And these are the questions that you need to do, but also they are listed in your lesson plan. Thank you.